They cut the cage match on Monday that they advertised between Bayley and Becky Lynch because the bloodline stuff ran long at the beginning of the show. Becky Lynch was supposed to win the cage match and then get beaten down by Damage Control. Instead, they had Damage Control jump her before she even got into the cage. And then they took her inside and they did they went right to the angle. They went right to the beatdown angle. We got no match. Because of that, and because the women got very little representation on that anniversary show at all, in fact, Medusa was the only female legend that even appeared on the show. I know Lita was there filming stuff for A&E, but we never saw her on camera. Because of this, the hashtag WWE Women Deserve Better was trending all night long. On the cage match snub, look, it sucks. I get it. It's live TV. Things go long. They have to make a split-second decision about what to cut, what not to cut. If something had to be cut, it should have been the Bianca Belair-Sonya Deville match. But people still would have been upset because they still would have been cutting a women's match. I assume they decided to stick with the Bianca match because they needed a way to get to the Alexa Bliss promo after. Bianca and Alexa had their match at the Royal Rumble yesterday. Becky and Bayley did not. They did not have a match. I mean, they were in the Rumble. But Becky and Bayley did not have anything going on at the pay-per-view as far as a singles match. So that's the decision they made. But here, my issue with it is this. When you advertise a steel cage match and then don't deliver that steel cage match, people have a right to be upset. Now, the Bella Twins, who were originally advertised for the show and then they got pulled, because as it turned out, they never actually agreed to be there. They had promotional stuff to do in New York. I guess Nikki Bella has a new show, so anyway, they were in New York. They posted, or Nikki posted, to her Instagram stories later that night when the show was over. They were calling out the company for doing nothing to pay tribute to all the female stars on Raw over the years. They were mocking the fact that they did not want to mention Sasha Banks. They did not want to mention Paige. Right? They said, oh, you can't mention Mercedes. You can't mention Saraya. I think people mistook that, and maybe this is the fault of some of the websites that reported this. I saw the clip. People mistook that, I think, in some cases to mean that the company told the Bellas that they did not want them mentioning Sasha or Saraya. That is not what happened. They just assumed, they weren't mentioned because they don't work there anymore. So, they can't be mentioned. The twins were on Tamron Hall's talk show a few days later. And this is what Nikki had to say. I think what anyone does when you have love and passion for something and you put your heart and soul into it, you want to be appreciated. And I think that that's in any industry. For us female wrestlers, it was Raw 30, the 30th anniversary. And throughout those 30 years, women have done a whole lot to make Raw what it is. So when you have a 3-hour show and it's male-dominated and women are not being honored pretty much at all, you just sit back and you're like, why aren't we being appreciated? Why don't you even have a video package showcasing what all these incredible women have done? I'm someone who they've called No Filter Nikki, and I know sometimes my team is like, take her phone away from her, but it made me upset for all the women because I know that feeling of walking out to the ring. It happens to some of the men as well. But where you walk out, you put your body on the line, you give it your all, and you just come back and you don't feel appreciated for that. Some of us have had career-ending injuries, and we shouldn't go away. And even if I feel like, if a wrestler leaves the company or they're no longer there, it doesn't mean that they should not be remembered. I wished and I hoped, and maybe that will be more the case in the future. We still have a way to go. But I wish that women will finally be appreciated for what they do. It's a valid point about at least not having a video package. This is a company that created an entire marketing campaign a few years ago out of the women's revolution, right? Nobody was tooting their horn more than WWE was about this whole women's revolution. You look at how the women were used on the show 20 years ago and how they're used today. Yeah, that's something they could have highlighted in a video, and she's right, they didn't do that. There have been some great moments on Raw over the years that have involved the women. Right? The night the women headlined the show for the first time with Lita and Stephanie McMahon. Everybody talks about Lita and Trish in 2004, but I guess they ignore Lita and Stephanie because The Rock was out there and Triple H was out there, and so, the men were still technically involved. But no, technically the first women's main event ever on Raw was not Lita and Trish, it was Lita and Stephanie McMahon in 2000. So, you could talk about that. Paige's Raw debut the night after WrestleMania, AJ Lee dropping her own pipe bomb on all the divas, which is one of my favorites. So, yeah, I get why they would be upset. But I would also say that WWE, in recent years, has done a much better job of featuring the women on Raw. Specifically, and that includes main events. Specifically on Raw, but more specifically in main event spots on the show. But where they fail is featuring them in compelling storylines. Spent the first 30 minutes of this show today talking to you about one of the most compelling storylines in wrestling that I've ever seen, right? Involving the Bloodline. Storyline like that might come along once every decade, right? They can't all be like the Bloodline storyline as layered and nuanced and, 9 months worth of work. Like, they can't all be that way. But you mean to tell me they can come up with a storyline like that, but they can't figure out a storyline involving the women on their show? That is a failure of WWE creative. That's where they fail, is featuring them in compelling storylines. There are none. Name one really interesting or compelling story right now involving the women. I can't think of one. There's nothing compelling about anything they have Charlotte Flair doing right now. Bianca Belair has been champion for almost a year and doesn't have anything interesting going on right now. This feud with Becky Lynch and Damage Control has been awful. When Ronda Rousey was still the champion, she had one of the most boring reigns that I've ever seen. This is where WWE is really shortchanging the women. Not every story is going to be as deep as the Bloodline, but that is where they have failed them. They don't give them much to do, and when they do, they don't give you a reason to really care or get invested in it. The most entertaining thing involving the women is the relationship with Rhea Ripley and Dominic, and their segments that they have together, especially when they go beat up Dominic's family. I will stop whatever I am doing to watch whenever a new video pops up. But that involves Rhea. It has nothing to do with the women's division. That's a Rhea Ripley thing. And that's a problem for Triple H.